My name is Jessica Monroe. I'm 42 years old. And last Friday, I got fired over Zoom by a man who signs his emails BQ, like he's a DJ instead of a CTO. No warning, no HR rep. Just a video call with him sipping some overpriced Hydro Flask and saying we're sunsetting the old scaffolding in favor of velocity. Which corporate translation you're out, and we're hoping you won't make noise. But I'm not here for pity. I'm here to tell you what happened after. Because something clicked in me during that call. Not rage, not grief. Something quieter, like a locked door creaking open. Before I can continue my story, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The thing is, I saw it coming. Brad Q walked into Stackwise Systems like a LinkedIn motivational post with teeth, wore a startup vest, a too-tight haircut, and dropped words like synergize vertical integration and AI-enhanced collaboration loops. He called my command line interface cute in a team meeting. Cute. Like it wasn't the damn backbone keeping 70% of our systems from combusting. I'd been there since 2016 when we were renting 2 desks at a WeWork off 6th Street in Austin, and the only HR policy was, don't piss off the dog. I built the architecture auth tokens, back-end stability layers, a scalable data pipeline, billing compliance, all of it. I onboarded our first dozen engineers and stayed when the rest bailed. But Brad saw only legacy. That's what he called me. Legacy system expert, like I was a fax machine that refused to die. And the minute he showed up, my calendar started thinning out like a bad hairline. Roadmap meetings vanished. Slack threads moved to channels I wasn't in. When I pinged product with questions, they replied in lowercase. That's when you know people are scared. It didn't feel like a firing at first, more like a vaporization, quiet, surgical, like they were erasing my fingerprint from the system one integration at a time. Then came Friday, 2:13 p.m. Zoom call. Brad smiled like a TED Talk with crypto breath, said words like strategic pivot and evolving architecture. Then he said it. You're no longer with the company effective immediately, like we were breaking up over brunch. No paperwork, no final review, just a Slack message, 15 minutes later. Hey, sorry, we didn't get to finish our convo earlier. Sending good vibes your way. Let me know if you need anything for your next adventure. Cheers. Cheers, like we just split a pizza. I didn't cry. I haven't cried at work since 2009, when our server room caught fire, and I had to put it out with a Mountain Dew and a shoebox. But I did log off, close my laptop like a coffin, and walk around the block in the dead quiet of winter. Austin doesn't do snow, but the sky was the color of regret. Low. Heavy. Listening. Back in my apartment, I poured bourbon 2 fingers, no ice, and opened my old employment folder. I hadn't looked at it in years, but something told me I should. And there it was. Page 6. Clause 14.3. Written in fine print. In the event of termination, without written notice of no fewer than 90 days. I didn't smile, I highlighted it, and I emailed my ex-husband with one subject line, still valid. I didn't hear back from Mark immediately, which made sense. My ex-husband may be a brilliant IP lawyer, but he answers emails like they're optional. While I waited, I stared at the clause again. Not in disbelief, more like recognition. Like seeing an old scar in the mirror and remembering how it got there. Back in 2016, Mark was still my husband. Still kissed me on the forehead before I pulled 14-hour coding shifts. He'd slipped that clause into the contract after watching me cry into my keyboard one too many nights. Those quiet, silent sobs only keyboards and ex-lovers remember. He told me, "You're going to build something amazing. Make sure they don't steal it when they realize how much they need you." At the time, I'd laughed. Thought he was being dramatic. But I let him at it. Buried deep between boilerplate NDAs and non-competes. No one even read it. Not the founder, not the investors. They were too busy trying to figure out if LaCroix was tax-deductible. Now, 7 years later, it was my only weapon. My invisible firewall. Over that weekend, I became a ghost inside the system I'd built. Not a poltergeist, no slamming doors, or public Slack rants. I moved quietly, efficiently, watching everything from the shadows they'd shoved me into. The junior engineers Brad had started mentoring were already looking rattled. One of them messaged me privately. He said my unit tests were too emotionally safe. What does that even mean? I didn't reply. Just archived the message. I reopened my Git logs. Every line of code I'd written, every schema, every commit. Timestamped, labeled, owned. Thousands of them. Every one a digital breadcrumb leading straight to me. I downloaded everything twice. Forked a clean backup to a private repo. Took screen recordings of key branches, noted who edited what and when. Backed up every Confluence doc I'd ever touched. Even the boring ones, the login protocols, the database version history, the compliance scripts nobody ever thanked me for maintaining. It's funny. They always call it legacy code like it's dusty, obsolete. But legacy means you outlasted the fools who tried to replace you. And that weekend, I became the ghost in the machine, watching them step around my work like it was furniture in a house they didn't build. I found the Slack thread they'd created without me Saxy Velocity Lab. Cute. A mess of emojis, stripped-down diagrams, and Brad's over-polished one-liners like we ship fast because we believe in impact. Below one post, I saw a screenshot from a 3-year-old UX build, one I'd designed during a stomach flu and a power outage. He'd captioned it, "Time to Evolve." They were mocking my architecture like it hadn't survived 5 product cycles, 2 pivots, and a co-founder meltdown. Still no word from Mark. I didn't flinch, I waited. And then Sunday 9:47 a.m., my inbox pinged. Subject L, body, oh yay, you've got them by the balls. That's when it shifted. Not rage, not satisfaction, just clarity. Like a fog lifting. They had fired the person who understood the kill switch, and I knew where it was buried. I stood up, made coffee, and sat back down. Time to prepare the ground. The first thing I did was go analog. Printed every page of the contract, including the clause, and circled it in neon pink. Then I made copies, highlighted my annotations, and scanned them again, one clean, one messy. Legal likes options. After that, I did what I always do when I need to think. I opened a terminal window. Just seeing that black screen blink at me, that little cursor waiting like an old friend, it calmed something in my chest. I wasn't scared. I wasn't sad. I was methodical. I began cataloging. There's a rhythm to code when you've written it yourself. You recognize your own indentations, your habits. I'd never noticed how many comments I left myself like diary entries. Note to self: fix this when Brad forgets what latency means. Reminder: this endpoint throttles on Tuesdays, don't ask why. The infrastructure didn't just have my name on it. It had my fingerprints, my patterns, my quirks. Even the naming conventions were mine. They'd kept them. Probably didn't even realize how obvious that made it. I started pulling evidence. Git commits from the first CI/CD pipeline I built in 2017. Jira tickets I personally closed during a billing crisis in 2019. A Slack thread where I talked to Junior through our deployment rollback process line by line. Performance logs showing my sandboxed patches working in production. The very first API gateway schematic I had whiteboarded and then diagrammed in Lucidchart. My initials were in the corner. I grabbed it all. And then came the juicy bit, a screen recording from a Zoom pitch Brad made to a new fintech partner. A colleague had sent it to me months ago, bragging about BQ's charisma. I almost deleted it, but this time I watched. Brad was showcasing the new platform, except nothing in it was new. He was demoing my API framework, calling it our new architecture, like he'd sketched it on a napkin during brunch. My cursor hovered over the play button for a long time. I didn't feel insulted. I felt documented. It was proof, not speculation, not feelings, evidence. I created a secure folder, labeled it Clause 14.3, Enforcement Kit, and filled it with everything I had: version control logs, documentation, diffs, call recordings, Slack archives. I even included a photo of me from the day we pushed our first beta live. My face looked 10 years younger. I was wearing a ratty hoodie and holding a cupcake someone had bought to celebrate. My eyes were tired but proud. I was proud. The contrast made me ache. The truth is, they weren't just trying to erase my code. They were trying to erase my time. But time leaves marks. You can rename a variable. You can rebrand a product. But unless you rip out every bone and rebuild it from scratch, the skeleton remembers who put it there. That weekend, I became my own archivist. And somewhere between the log files and the screenshots, I realized I wasn't preparing for a fight. I was preparing for closure, on my terms. I zipped the folder and sent it to Mark. Subject proof. Body, all timestamps included. Let me know when you're ready to invoice. Mark called me the next morning. Didn't even say hello, just Jesus, Jess. You kept everything. I built everything. I said, sipping coffee from a mug that still had our old company logo, Stackwise Systems, back when it was still ours. Not his, not Brad's, ours. Mark whistled through his teeth. They're screwed. You know that, right? I didn't respond. Not out of modesty, out of discipline. I needed to stay focused. Feelings were expensive. I'd already given them enough of mine for free. He kept talking. Clause 14.3 is ironclad. They terminated you without notice. No severance, no documentation. It reverts everything. And by everything, I mean everything you touched while employed. The frameworks, the internal API stack, the schema designs, hell, even the error messaging if it follows your logic. I nodded, took another sip. Jess, he said, you sure you want to do this? No, I said quietly. I need to. It wasn't about vengeance. It was about visibility. About drawing a red circle around the parts of myself they tried to call obsolete. If they could strip my name from the dashboard, they could strip it from my legacy too. And I wasn't going to let that happen. Mark sent a first draft of the cease and desist within the hour. It was tight. Surgical. Legal napalm in Helvetica. No threats, just facts. A copy of the clause. A list of protected IP, screenshots, commits, version histories. He even added a footer that read, your organization may retain temporary access to the product stack under provisional license for 30 days pending negotiation or immediate cessation. Further use beyond this window constitutes infringement. Then he sent the draft invoice. Total 2,984.30 you see, not a round number. That was deliberate. Round numbers scream ego. Broken decimals whisper math. This figure was composed of licensing fees, unauthorized use damages, projected revenue attribution, a bad faith acceleration clause he'd invented just for fun. Mark had always been poetic under pressure. I stared at it. Not with disbelief, but awe. Every line item wasn't just a fee, it was a receipt. Proof that my work had value, monetary, quantifiable, real. Before Brad, no one at Stackwise ever said thank you when I fixed something at 2 a.m. This was a thank you. An expensive one. Want me to send it now? Mark asked. Or wait until Monday morning when their espresso machines are humming? I smiled. Let them choke on the straw. We scheduled the email for 9:01 a.m. Monday. One subject line, RRE, IP ownership reversion. Immediate action required. One PDF clause 14.3. One invoice 284.20 TAS. No apologies, no flourish, just the facts. Then we waited. I didn't log into any Slack threads. Didn't check LinkedIn. Didn't pace or panic. I just folded laundry, watered my plants, and made soup from scratch like it was any other Sunday. Because the system they thought they could own was about to remind them who wrote its rules. And I didn't have to lift a single finger to press send. Monday came in quietly, like a hungover intern. The sky outside my window was overcast, the air thick with that Austin humidity that turns your hair into a personality. I watched the clock click from 9:00 to 9:01 a.m., then refreshed my inbox. Nothing yet. But somewhere across town in that glossy mid-rise, I used to call an office Brad Quinn, BQ, was opening an email that would land like a lawsuit wrapped in a love letter. I didn't have to wonder how he reacted. By 10:42 a.m., a former teammate forwarded me a Slack message from Brad. Legal is reviewing a minor clause concern. All systems go. Let's push velocity. Push velocity! It was like watching someone tweet while the house behind them burned, because by then the burn had already started. The new Stackwise platform had launched over the weekend quietly, of course. 3:04 a.m., Sunday, coward hour. No announcements, no press, just a banner switch and a tweet that said, "We've ascended." Velocity realized. Ascended, right. By noon, Monday reports started rolling in on Discord and in public threads. API keys were timing out. Token refresh windows weren't working. Some financial partners, real banks with real money, were getting 403s in the middle of transaction chains. People were furious. The customer success team was sending canned apologies, like a confetti cannon of regret. Someone posted a screenshot of the admin dashboard with the caption, "Looks like legacy was holding up more than they thought." I didn't gloat, I documented. By 3:00 p.m., their lead dev, a guy who once asked me if SQL was just Google Sheets for code, was begging for help in private channels. I saw a message forwarded to me anonymously. "Does anyone know what the fallback protocol is for auth loop timeouts? I think Jess used to handle this." Yeah, Jess did. But Jess doesn't work there anymore. I made tea and sat by the window with my laptop watching the system unravel line by line. The problem was predictably stupid. Before I left, I'd flagged 2 Jira tickets about a lightweight security overhaul Brad insisted on, said my existing framework was paranoid. I'd replied with a single sentence. It's not paranoia if it's the only thing between you and a breach. Both tickets were closed by Brad. Comments. We'll revisit post-launch. Guess what never got revisited? By 6:00 p.m., users were losing session data. Endpoints were logging zeros. And their biggest enterprise client, an insurance company, with 8,000 users posted on Twitter. Stackwise were down across all platforms. Who's fixing this? Brad replied with the worst phrase you can type during a meltdown. Looking into it. Everything's fine. It wasn't. At 7:19 p.m., I got a call from Mark. No response from their legal team yet, he said. Good, I replied, sipping chamomile. He paused. You okay? I considered it. My blood pressure was calm. My mind was sharp. The only thing I felt was ready. I'm not here to burn it down, I said. Just here to turn off the gas and let the spark find its way. Mark chuckled low and slow. You always had the best one-liners. By 9:30 p.m., the Stackwise homepage had a banner in red. We're experiencing elevated error rates. Working on stability improvements. Translated from Tech PR. We broke it, and the woman who warned us doesn't work here anymore. Tuesday morning arrived like a slap in a silent room. No more cheerful Slack posts from Brad about vision or synergy. No more rocket emojis. Just a company-wide Slack outage at 8:13 a.m. Intentional, I was told later. He had IT shut it down temporarily because things were getting too emotional. Translation, he'd lost the narrative. Meanwhile, the email I'd been waiting for finally arrived. Not from Brad. Never from Brad. It came from a generic legal alias at Stackwise, legalstackwisesystems.com. Mail to legalstackwisesystems.com. The subject line was cautious, request for clarification. Intellectual property use. Cute. Inside the message was as dry as overbaked toast. Lots of in good faith and ongoing review. And please provide further clarification regarding the scope of your claim. No apology, no concession. Just fear in a blazer. I pictured some junior associate frantically Googling IP clause enforceability startup Texas. I forwarded it to Mark. His reply came 60 seconds later. Subject response draft body. Let's make them blink. He updated the invoice. No drama, just 4 new line items added in bold. Post-termination unauthorized use, $642, $500. Security exposure, due to IP tampering, $389,000. Investor risk disclosure failure, $711,000. Bad faith clause, trigger penalty, $1, $200, $1,000. Total revised invoice 4926/8/2012. He stripped the footer of legalese and replaced it with one line in bold. Please remit payment or propose settlement schedule by end of quarter to avoid binding arbitration. Attached to it was a scanned photo of Clause 14.3, now laminated, highlighted and time-stamped. In the margin I'd written in red Sharpie. You should have read the fine print. We sent it back. 3 hours later, Stackwise's website quietly removed the platform relaunch banner. By mid-afternoon, their press release about the new era of innovation had been deleted from LinkedIn. Still, Brad hadn't responded. Publicly, he was still clinging to the wheel like a drunk Lyft driver with GPS on mute. He posted a selfie from the office espresso machine around 4 p.m., with the caption, "Big week, big vision, big things coming. Rise and grind." Underneath it, someone commented, "Did you grind the IP clause too, or just ignore it?" It was deleted 10 minutes later. People had started paying attention. That evening, I got a BCC from a former product lead. The board had called an emergency session, not a meeting, a session. Code for get the investors on the line now. They weren't worried about the invoice. Not yet. They were worried about the timing. See, Stackwise had a funding round closing in 2 weeks. And my clause, my signature, was now the biggest obstacle on their runway. You can raise $50 million in fresh capital. But if someone can prove your back end belongs to her, that money vanishes like a bonus in a bear market. I didn't pop champagne. I didn't even smile. I just clicked save on the email thread, updated the folder, and stared out my window at the skyline. The buildings looked taller now. Or maybe I was just sitting straighter. In that moment, I realized something. They didn't believe me. They thought I was bluffing, thought I'd go away, that I was too tired or too old or too bitter to follow through. They didn't understand the difference between noise and precision. And the invoice, that wasn't a threat. It was a mirror. By Wednesday, the smell of panic was practically digital. Even from my living room, I could feel the temperature in their office drop through the screen. Their homepage banner changed again this time to a muted teal with soft white letters. "We're improving stability for a better experience." In tech PR, that translates to, "We broke it, and the person who can fix it hates us." Traffic to my LinkedIn profile spiked 230% overnight. I hadn't posted anything. Didn't need to. People were finding me reading between the lines. A few brave ex-colleagues even reached out. "Hey Jess, if you ever start something new, I'd love to be part of it." That part made me ache a little. The loyalty, the quiet respect, the small digital gestures of people who remembered I was more than a line of code on a diagram Brad barely understood. Meanwhile, Stackwise was bleeding. Users were dropping, investors were circling, and the platform, the big shiny thing they had pushed live without me, was falling apart beneath its own branding. The skeleton was mine, the bones, the nervous system. All they did was slap a new font on it and repackage my old work as Brad's vision. Even the error messages still had my original phrasing. One partner sent me a screenshot of a crash warning, "Authentication failed. Please refresh your token or contact support with code 91A. Code 91A was an inside joke I'd embedded in 2020 during a miserable Christmas on-call shift. It stood for 9 emails, 1 answer my fix. Brad hadn't even known to scrub it. Because Brad didn't know what he was standing on. He thought velocity meant progress. But when you're driving on a bridge someone else built, you better make sure you're not heading toward the edge. Thursday morning, things got worse. TechSnitch, a blog that loves startup carnage, ran a front-page article. CTO under fire IP clause may derail Stackwise relaunch. They cited a highly placed source and internal legal documents, suggesting key infrastructure was developed by a former employee who retained ownership rights under a rarely seen contract clause. My clause. I didn't plant the story. Didn't need to. When a ship starts taking on water, the crew leaks everything before the rats even scurry. Brad stayed silent publicly, but internally, Slack screenshots started surfacing private messages from him, frantically asking the lead dev if a different framework could be deployed retroactively and whether Jess left anything undocumented. The desperation was almost poetic. At 2:04 p.m., I got a call from someone I hadn't heard from in a year. "Hey Jess, this is Nate. I'm on the board now. We wanted to know if you'd be open to a conversation, to share your side." I paused. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I wanted him to feel that pause. "I'm busy," I said then, let the silence land. "But I'll think about it." We both knew I wouldn't, not yet. They needed to sweat. They needed to understand the difference between access and ownership, between visibility and control. I wasn't looking for applause. I was building leverage. That evening, I lit a candle, opened my laptop, and ran a script I hadn't touched in over a year. Just a health check. The same one I used to use during system audits. It pinged the backend 5 times and returned 5 clean responses. Even broken, my code was still breathing. But the company, that was already on life support. Friday arrived sharp and metallic. A week since the Zoom call that cut me loose, and yet I'd never felt more embedded in the architecture of their failure. I didn't need to be in the building to haunt it. I was the building. At 8:07 a.m., I got the call. Not from HR. Not from Brad. From the investor. Michael Tiernan, partner at Sequoia Ridge Capital, and the man who'd turned Stackwise from a startup with foam tile floors into a Series B darling with real teeth. "Jessica," he said, warm but clipped. "First off, I owe you an apology." I let him talk. He used phrases like regrettable oversight miscommunication at the leadership level, deep respect for your contributions. Then he dropped it. "We'd like to bring you back, not as a developer, of course, but as chief product strategist. You'd define the next chapter, set the structure, your vision, full executive authority over anything that touches your code base. It should have felt like a victory, control, respect, autonomy. But I didn't come this far to be rehired. I came to own what I built. I have one condition," I said. "Name it. I keep the IP, all of it. Full legal ownership over everything I built past and future. You license it from me, month to month, revocable on my terms. I hold the keys. You borrow them." There was a silence, not rude, just stunned. "That's highly unconventional." "So was firing me over Zoom," I said. Then he did something unexpected. He laughed, low, genuine, almost impressed. "Fair enough," he said. "Send it over. We'll draw up the papers." I didn't gloat. Didn't giddy tweet. I opened a blank document and started outlining the new contract clause by clause. Every condition, every firewall, every boundary. No more stand-ups. No more brainstorms that were really just ego theater. No more alignment calls where I had to nod politely while a 29-year-old explained my own system to me using phrases he'd copy-pasted from a Notion template. When I stepped back into Stackwise 2 days later, it wasn't with a badge. It was with a license key. I was no longer an employee. I was an entity, a partner with veto rights over any change that touched my original stack. Every email routed through my consulting address, every request tagged as billable, and every meeting scheduled in my time zone, not some 6 a.m. sprint sync designed to prove loyalty. The interim CTO, a mild guy from an external firm, asked if I wanted a welcome call. I declined. Told him I preferred to keep things asynchronous, unless the issue was billable. He didn't argue. I wasn't back to rebuild. I was back to supervise. And they all knew it. The product stabilized. The investors calmed. Brad's espresso machine selfies vanished. But none of that mattered. What mattered was this. The code still answered to me, and now so did they. They didn't clap when I walked in. Tech doesn't do applause for architects. But they cleared the path quietly, awkwardly, like they weren't sure if I was a returning colleague or a court-appointed handler. I didn't wear a blazer. I wore the same zip-up hoodie I launched our first beta in, the one with the faded Stackwise logo half peeled off the sleeve. Let them see it. Let them remember. The same junior engineers who once called me ma'am, with lowercase dread, now avoided eye contact. One of them had the nerve to send a Slack message the night before. "Hey Jessica, just wondering if you're available for a quick sync to realign architecture priorities." I replied with a thumbs-up emoji and nothing else. I didn't come back to chat. My desk hadn't been touched, probably because no one wanted to decide what to do with it. They'd removed my nameplate, but the chair still had the lumbar pillow I brought from home. I didn't sit down, just plugged in my laptop, opened my consulting dashboard, and activated the kill switch overlay. It wasn't dramatic, just a script that sat quietly behind their UI, verifying permissions, routing logs, highlighting API misfires in a shade of red I'd once picked while sick with the flu and running on gas station coffee. One by one, I revoked access to modules they'd patched over without understanding. Not to punish them, just to ensure nobody broke the bones again. I locked down root access to legacy components and assigned provisional tokens to the ones still in use. If they wanted deeper access, they'd have to go through me, through the license, through the clause. Brad's name had already been scrubbed from the team page. No announcement, no farewell, just gone. Like a marketing experiment that failed A/B testing. Word through the grapevine was that he tried blaming the legal team first, then the engineers, then hilariously me. Said I didn't warn him clearly enough about the scope of the clause. As if all intellectual property reverts to the employee was open to interpretation. But the board didn't care who sunk the ship. They just needed a body for the wolves. So they gave them Brad. And the rest of the team started treating me like a fire marshal walking through a room full of exposed wires. I didn't burn the place down, but I let them know I carried matches. What they hadn't expected was the quiet. I wasn't loud. I didn't strut or speechify. I just moved through the systems like I always had, efficient, clean, exact. Only this time, every keystroke had a price tag. Every consult had a paper trail. Every warning was logged. Mark called that afternoon, right after he'd sent the final version of the updated invoice. Just a heads up, he said, I added 4 late-stage penalties. No room for wiggle. How'd they take it? He laughed. 3 VPs signed it so fast their pens squeaked. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. I had come back, yes, but not to fix things. I came back to make sure they remembered who held the blueprint. I stayed exactly 31 days. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to watch them squirm just long enough to understand they were renting the walls I'd built. Every line of code they touched, every system, tweak, every roadmap revision filtered through me. I wasn't the bottleneck. I was the pipeline, the gate, the part of the system you don't notice until it's gone and everything starts to fail. The new CTO, a quiet Stanford guy named Eli, finally asked the question no one else had. What happens after the license term ends? I looked at him for a long beat. Depends who's holding the pen. He nodded slowly. He got it. Unlike Brad, Eli didn't try to steal the fire. He asked where to place the extinguisher. I left on my own terms. Not with fanfare or exit emails. Just a signed licensing renewal agreement and a reminder in bold at the top. IP ownership retained by consultant. All rights reserved. As I walked out for the last time, I paused in the lobby. The glass walls reflected the fluorescent quiet of a place that thought it was a rocket ship, but turned out to be a kite in a hurricane. I wasn't angry anymore. That was the strange part. The rage had long since drained out of me. What was left wasn't revenge. It was clarity. I went home, made tea, and opened my terminal window. The same repo blinked back at me. Alive. Breathing. Still mine. Still answering only to me. They thought firing me would remove the obstacle. But obstacles remember, and I remembered everything. The platforms will change. The startups will rise and crash like tides. But the code knows who built it. Last week, one of the new engineers sent me a message. Hey, just found some of your old documentation. It's brilliant. I didn't realize you, built everything. I replied with a thumbs up and a quote. The same one I taped to the inside of my filing cabinet the day I signed that original contract. When you fire the woman who wrote the rules, you better hope she doesn't remember where she filed them. Because sometimes survival isn't about screaming louder. It's about outlasting the people who thought they could silence you. We think we're replaceable until someone tries. But I wasn't just a part of the machine, I was the machine. They fired a function not realizing I was the source code. This story isn't just mine. It's for anyone who's ever been erased, rewritten, or minimized by people who didn't bother to learn what you do, let alone who you are. Have you ever been cut loose from something you built? Ever watched someone else try to take credit for your sweat? I'd love to hear your story in the comments. If this resonated, like the video, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs a reminder. Being overlooked doesn't mean you're unimportant. Sometimes it just means they're blind. Thank you for listening. And remember, some blueprints don't fade.